Hi, Glenda. How are you?
Hi, Hugo. I'm well. And how about you?
I'm really great. I am happy that you're with me today, me and Destino. I really wanted to speak to you about the work that you did specifically on Will and Grace, the original and the revival.
Okay, great. Let's talk.
Um, I wanted to know first off, the like what are you most proud of the original, like the sets that you've done?
Well, originally, the original Will and Grace, I think that it was so long ago, and sitcoms had a specific look then. And
Yeah.
I think in many ways, we broke that mold. We didn't go to prop houses, or if we did, not very often. And we tended to do a lot more from independent vendors, whether it was specifically in set dressing. It was really remarkable. And we tended to use a lot more real materials, not tile board. We used real uh, tile, and um, the wood was wood. The doors were mahogany. So
Oh.
and we always thought that real looked real. And there, the first run of Will and Grace went for 8 seasons. And in that, I think we remodeled the kitchen at least twice. And just because our character was very interested in style and design, and it wasn't a static set. We changed out furniture, we changed out artwork. There are certain things that always remain because were very iconic to the set. But yeah, we there was a real evolution of those of his apartment space and Grace's office as well.
Yeah, I always enjoyed collaborating with you on building stuff like that just because it showcases a lot of who that character is and you're able to tell more of the story just like on your part as well.
I agree. It was kind of a production designer's or a designer's dream to have a character who was so motivated and so current on design. So that was the challenge, is staying ahead of the curve. What's our next step? Where are we going from here?
I would love to hear your process as far as like what it is when you get a new swing set for a show like Will and Grace. How do you start your process in that way?
Well, always I start with precedent, whether it's a dress shop or on Will and Grace, the writers were very specific. I remember one they wanted us to recreate per se, which was like the of the moment restaurant. And
Okay.
so we had to just, mine the internet. And sometimes we even sent like a scout out to take photos for us. I had to do that a couple of times because we were located in Los Angeles, and Will and Grace was in New York, so I had to
Right.
send people out and take photos for us. And then I would capture the spirit of those photos. I didn't recreate it like, inch by inch, but whether it was a color scheme or materials, I got the sensibility from the photos and I made it work for the action because it's always about how an actor moves through a set. That's the most important thing.
Right. And as now that you bring up that topic, do you like to have the set fully dressed and built for the actors, or do you fill it in as the rehearsals go along?
Ideally, everything is on its mark day one.
Mm.
I don't want to leave anything as a question. That's when you get notes.
Oh,
If you deliver a fully dressed set,
yeah.
then let them give you notes on a completed idea, not an incomplete idea, because oftentimes the notes will maybe, either they're going to come back as something that you've already considered, or they'll come back as something that you haven't considered yet. All the wheels are in motion going in a different direction. So at least give them a complete work and then get the notes.
Yeah, I always enjoy doing walkthroughs with you, especially once the set is already fully complete the way you and the decorator envisioned it, and then just to hear the feedback and see how the producers get to engage with that fully built set.
Yeah, we love that. It is always, we get Christmas mornings every week. It's
Yeah.
just, the kids come down and, let's open up the door, see, look what you got. So it's a very fun process.
What about, is there any set that really stands out from the original Will and Grace that you remember fondly?
Well, I think the most iconic is the apartment,
Yeah.
but um, but it's the Karen Walker sets.
Oh, yeah,
It's
yeah,
the
yeah.
apartment of 1,000 rooms. We rarely went to the same room twice, except for the foyer. That
Hmm.
was kind of like like a datum line, like, okay, we know where we are. But there was a kitchen set, and it had multiple openings. And it was one of those sets, it was really spectacular. Like, I can't imagine having a kitchen that looked like that. There was a spiral staircase. There was a vintage um, refrigerator door that was made out of wood. I don't even, I found it in a salvage yard, and it was absolutely spectacular. It had all the original nickel hardware on it, and it was oak, and it was maybe 6 or 8 inches thick. It was like unbelievable, this refrigerator door. We made a kitchen island that was about 9 feet long, and it was the real thing. It was out of steel and white oak. And I think at one point, Karen Walker got on it with the chef. It was such a beautiful set. It
Yeah.
had a greenhouse window that was curved, and it was gorgeous. So I was very proud of that set, and we saw it once.
I honestly really do enjoy that part of it when you get to dream up these sets and I get to watch you do this. And then specifically something that you commented on was that you rehab or repurpose finds that you see out in the real world and you put them in our sets. So I really love to see those transformations.
Yeah, I do. I really, really love finding vintage windows or molding that, I can't have made any longer.
Right.
And I love reusing them. And if it is just for a swing set, I will pull them right out afterwards, and we'll just save them for
Yeah.
another use. And they're so beautiful.
Well, I was lucky to join your team on the revival of Will and Grace, so I'd love to touch on that show. What was it like to have to bring back the original Will and Grace apartment and bring it up to date?
So that was really a kooky situation. It was 2016 or right before. Max and David had written a a short video for Hillary Clinton, and they wanted it to happen they wanted it to take place in Will's apartment. And that apartment, after the series took place and after we struck it, it went
Yeah.
to Emerson College in
Oh,
Boston, and they had a space for it, and it was on display for many years.
yeah,
And then when that was over, somehow those walls found their way back to the San Fernando Valley in, like a storage unit. And they asked me to go look at them. And, I don't know if you know what that looks like. It's just looking at walls that are lined up. And, it's not like, I'm not a Hercules or anything. I'm not going to
yeah,
move a wall. I go, yeah, they're walls.
yep,
And, and so we dug it out, and we stood it up, and we reimagined it. It was like taking an old car, and you want to put it in a parade, so you have to make it, has to run again.
yeah,
And you want a perfect paint job and perfect upholstery. So there was a lot of work to go into these existing walls, because they weren't in great shape. So, but in that design process, again, he got new windows,
yeah.
or not new windows, he got a new kitchen,
Oh,
new
okay.
appliances, a new fireplace.
Yeah.
And that was just fabulous. Like, I think The last time we saw Will's apartment, they were walnut
Oh,
cabinets, and and then this one, I think I used white oak, and they were all custom built cabinets. The fireplace, I did use soapstone, real soapstone, and then some scenic soapstone. And there was like some beveled edges. It was spectacular, and all new furniture, and that was really fun. I went from the original set decorator didn't follow the show to the reboot. So I inherited you.
yeah.
So you joined the team, and so did Peter Gursky. And it was very fun recreating a new set. And our executive producers, the writers, they're really sophisticated when it comes to design. And I think that one of them really wanted an Hermes bench because at this point in Will's life, he could afford it.
Yeah.
And trying to defend that kind of cost to a studio was pretty amazing.
Yeah, I know. I do remember that story. The placement of it too was like right by the door, right?
Yeah, it was downstage, so it wasn't in every scene,
Yeah.
and it was a foreground piece. But anyone who knows what that is, it
Yeah.
will make you sit up and pay attention. But it happened over and over again. Like what the sofa was one that Holly Hunt let us use, or not let us
Okay.
use. They let us buy a showroom sample, and that's not a normal thing because they want it on their showroom so they can sell it. And then the one of the executive producers, he had admired a coffee table he had seen on someone's yacht, and
Oh,
it was by a designer, Rose Tarlow. And so I got on the phone, I called the Rose Tarlow in Los Angeles,
yeah.
and they didn't have one, but they did find us one in Texas. And then Peter had to get it, he had to have it paid for and get it on a truck and get it to Los Angeles. So, it's not for the meek, that process.
No, no, and I'm very fortunate and I love to see it firsthand when we get to do stuff like that on our new stuff. But for the that segment that you guys revived the sets, did it change at all when the show went to a full series, the revival?
No. Oh, well, for the commercial, or that's what
Yeah,
we called
for
it.
Hillary's commercial.
We did not have the Rose Tarlow coffee table or the
Oh,
Hermes
okay.
bench. We kind of, we got it as close to, when we saw it last. Yeah, what was the year? Was it '08? Yeah, I think it was like '08 or something like that.
Um, I
Or
did
maybe
want
longer. I don't know. Sorry.
No, I did want to bring up the work that we did on the I Love Lucy episode because I know it was one of the most popular ones that we did. What was that like for you to recreate those sets from I Love Lucy?
It was a blast.
Yeah.
And like those scenes, so
Uh-huh.
many people are familiar with them,
Yeah.
and everyone has a very strong memory of them. And I'm going to bring up the candy factory as a for instance.
Right.
So we knew we were going to do that scene, and several departments watched it, and they watched it, in context to what they do. And I remember, like special effects said, oh, they had located a conveyor belt that would do this. And I'm just watching what I'm watching. And I go, it's not a conveyor belt. Someone's just pulling a piece of paper,
Yeah.
from one hole and, releasing it on the other. And so we had to, have this discussion. And I think that, well, they ended up doing what I thought it was. So I think I was right. And and also, those were in black and white. The
Right.
original I Love Lucy was black and white. And we were going to shoot it in color, but they could in post make it black and white. So we weren't really sure what the what was going to air. I didn't know whether it was going to be black and white or color. So I kind of had to work in a grayscale to try to figure it out, even if it was in color, that, it was so neutral. And also we couldn't find any real drawings of the original.
Uh-huh.
And so I knew how tall Lucille Ball was. And and so I used her as my scale for the apartment.
Right.
And those apartment doors were insanely tall,
Yeah.
the original ones. And so we just used her. She was my scale. I go, well, let's lay her across there. This is how big these walls were. And
Yeah.
it was really, it was fun. And I think that I got so many uh, notes and comments from people who, you know, they're super familiar with the sets and they couldn't believe how close they were. And that made, I think that was a huge win. It's just our by observing what was shot, we did our best to recreate it and without any real physical documentation, whether it was color, scale, the materials they used. And that was one of the first, the only times I'd ever gotten a handwritten thank you note, and it was from her daughter.
Wow. Oh, that
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, that was so cool to see her on the set.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And she wrote a thank you note.
Wow,
And yeah,
that's such a gift. And I just to add on to what you just said, I had a lot of fun collaborating with all of you guys because the attention to detail. For example, all the signage in the back.
the Vegavita, but I'm
I was able to work off of like YouTube videos and like a lot of it was fuzzy, but working with our team and Peter Gursky and just we had to figure out what everything said specifically on every signage and
And can you believe how
how
small that set was?
yeah,
That
exactly.
one was tiny,
Small.
tiny little set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'd love to jump from that side of New York to the other side, which is your project Two Broke Girls. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you designed that show?
Sure. That show was so different in terms of it's a very different side of New York from Will Truman's, which is very urbane and sophisticated. And, beauty is so important to Two Broke, where we needed to show that these girls are broke. And I just remember so many of my early conversations with Michael Patrick King,
Yeah.
how important that authenticity would be to the show. And we didn't bring one new thing onto that set. Everything was old. I actually used duct tape on pieces of upholstery that the decorator found,
Yeah.
and we had to put it together and hold it with duct tape. And the few pieces we did make the booths, um,
Oh, okay.
the diner, we
Minor.
had to make them because they were specific. I needed, a certain size, and of course I wanted that orange. And what we did to the fabric, the naga hide, we found like a vintage textured naga hide, and then, just working with the painters actually, with a sander, a hand sander, and working through some of it, and then using a little bit of like a nicotine stain, and then also some wax, just to get that age. And then we had to, make sure that it dried so it didn't get onto those costumes, which those costumes were major. That fabric on the
Yeah.
costumes, I think that Tracy Fields, she had to have it made like in Belgium, that
Oh, is
heavy
that right?
polyester. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
custom made fabric. It was phenomenal, the detail on that show to make it look that way.
Yeah, I'd love to touch more on the swing sets that you had on that show because like I do remember when they had their own shop as well. And what is one of the sets that stands out to you?
Well, the shop was really beautiful,
Yeah.
but again, that is, like I had learned so much from Will and Grace, about high design and it's a passion,
Yeah.
it's not like I don't sit down on Monday and start thinking about design. I live it. I
Yeah.
love design. So, but for Two Broke, I have to say, maybe the dumpster, that there was a few episodes where Max's love interest was a young man who lived in a dumpster.
Eric
And the
Andre.
dumpster, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And while it looked just like a real dumpster, we made that entire thing and it was all steel. And we had hydraulic lifts on it so that, the top will go up. And the way that we fitted it in the interior, how it was appointed, how the bed laid out, and all of the camera ports that we needed for it.
Yeah.
That was a little masterful little piece of work between, the departments that had to work with it, you know, lighting and the metal shop, how, what they were so brilliant, all their solutions for these things. And then the carpenters having to work around welds, so that things fit correctly.
Yeah. Well, I really wanted to touch on the topic of your process when you start a new show, like a pilot. What's the first thing that you receive, or how do you?
Well, after the initial phone call, and the phone call can be from different people. It could be
Yeah.
from the line producer, one of the producers or one of the creators,
Yeah.
and they'll send me a script. And this is my process. I read the script once. And then, I just read it for fluidity. I just want to know, like the pace in a certain way.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I don't know if I'm the best person to read it for pace, but I just want to read it just like a reader. And then the second time I read it, which is usually the same day, maybe just back to back, then I
Yeah.
do breakdown. I do a breakdown that is scene by scene, set by set, who's in that,
Yeah.
and day or night, and how many pages. That will tell me, that starts almost giving an order to the stage plan.
Okay.
There might be a set that is 22 pages of that script is in front of the audience. And since I work on audience shows, that tells me that that probably is the set to go in front of the audience. And then there's a hierarchy, right to left, and depending, yeah. So I start doing like almost Venn diagrams,
Yeah.
like, oh, in this scene, um, they're, they come from the bedroom hallway and they have to get to the fireplace. And he doesn't have a lot to say. So that probably should be pretty adjacent. Then in another scene, someone has to get from the dining room table to that fireplace really quickly. So it just starts giving me, um, they're not puzzle pieces, but it's a flow. And so that's what I do. And then after I get a sense of like the spatial relationships,
Right.
I start doing research. Is it in Knoxville? What's that character? Is it in Austin? Is it in Seattle? And then I just start looking at precedent and the architectural stock that is in those areas. And I try to find something unique to that space if it supports the character,
Yeah.
if it supports the story. So that's my process. And then on top of that, then I go directly into plan.
Okay.
That's where I work the most because I think that is probably my biggest responsibility. How many opportunities can I provide for the director and the actors for movement? And then after that, then I start layering on character, materials, the look, the style, all that.
Yeah, I wanted to lead into who do you collaborate with? Can I touch on who your team is?
Of course. Connie Marinos, I have been with Connie. She's steadfast since the year 2000.
Yeah.
So, and then And then I also work often with Arthur Chadwick on pilots. So between those two, they really understand um, my aesthetic,
Yeah.
and I'm very particular about dimension. Like I rarely use um, like a standard door height or a door
Mhm.
width. I find them to be, awkward visually on camera.
Yeah.
So most of my doors, especially if they're behind an actor,
Yeah.
um, the dimensions are different. And those two people know me. They're like, okay, is this, a 210 door? Is this a 28 door? And it has nothing to do with code or anything. It's just what I think looks better on camera. And then I often am feeding them details like, okay, this door will look like that. And rarely do all my doors in a set, if it's an older building, they won't all be identical because
Okay.
buildings evolve, and people will change out a door or something. I tend to change. It's an idiosyncratic method for sure. I don't. I change things around just because I like that. It doesn't look like a developer built a set.
Yeah, and Connie is your art director and
And
Arthur
Arthur
is
is a
your
set designer.
set designer.
And then the decorators that I work with the most
Mhm.
would be Amy Feldman and Peter Gursky. And I've worked with other decorators as well.
Yeah.
Linda Burbank, I did like 3 seasons or 4 seasons, of a show. And then Melinda Ritz, that's who I started with when I was first bumped up to a production designer. I
Oh,
worked with Melinda for 8 seasons.
yeah, I have a lot of love and history with Linda as far as like she was a huge inspiration for
Mhm.
me. Um, when do you decide to bring the set designer on board? Is that after you had your time with Connie, or do you bring them on board at the same time?
Sometimes Connie is also, she has a dual card. So it just depends on the staffing allowances.
Okay.
Sometimes I can only have one, but for a pilot, I can usually have two. And they will start almost at the same time. And I will break up depending on how much needs to be drawn, how much new build there is. Uh, I'll break it up, and I may have Arthur do all the swing sets and Connie do the permanent sets. It just depends. It depends on the particular show.
Okay. And can we touch on what inspired you to become a production designer?
Um, Well, as I said, I have always loved design. And so um, I have a master's in architecture.
Mhm.
And after working for about 18 months I had worked in two different design offices, and they were very different. One was, like a big corporate architecture firm, and the second was like 5 people, 5 architects.
Yeah.
And so neither one was the most satisfying experience for me. Like in the big firm, like I worked on just a stairwell for over a year. One
Okay.
stairwell. And and this is before computers.
Yeah.
So I had to hand draw a staircase that went up, I don't know, like 4 flights, maybe. Yeah, it wasn't that tall of a building. And then, like I had to change the entire stairwell again by a quarter of an inch. And it's not erasing it. Every step had to be
Yeah.
changed. So it was grueling. So I knew that wasn't for me.
Yeah.
And then
I could understand that. Yeah.
and then, with the small office, again, unless it wasn't the most satisfying experience. And I always was familiar a little bit with entertainment. I thought, how can my skills be
Yeah.
applied to television or film? And I had a friend who was working at Paramount at the time, and he set up a lunch for me to meet a production designer.
Oh, okay.
And And that day, he didn't hire me because he couldn't, because I wasn't in the union. He had a friend of his call me who was a non-union production designer, and I worked for him for 13 years.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I didn't know that story. Well, do you have any words of encouragement or any advice for up and coming professionals in production design?
Well, it's such a different world now than it
Yeah,
was, and
absolutely.
it's really different. But if I could, well, I watched a few of your YouTubes,
Oh, thank you.
your videos, and I think that you find the department that you're most interested in, and you try to go to whatever those unions are doing, any kind of mixer, any kind of special event that they have, and go
Yeah.
to those and put yourself out there. And if it's about design, if you want to be in the art department, look at everything, always be looking. How does a window fit into a wall? What do the difference between a modern paisley and an old paisley? Just, you don't have to, it's not scholarly, it's visual, and understand what you see.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, we do a lot of work here that we really enjoy, and you have to make sure that you love what you're gonna do because it's you got to really dedicate and throw yourself into it.
Yeah, I think that makes all the difference. At least for me, I can't imagine putting all these years and hours
Yeah.
something that I didn't love. And I love every day, I love what I do.
Yeah, and I'm really grateful to be there with you because I have a lot of fun as well.
And I'm grateful that you're there.
Thank you, Glenda. Well, I really enjoyed our chat, and this was a lot of fun.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Hugo. Go.
Of course.
Okay.
Bye.